Hi, and welcome to Portland Conversations. I am Jason Allen, and the conversation rolls on as we talk about the upcoming Portland elections. Hey, today we are with Portland City Commissioner, Position 1 candidate, Candace Avalos. Candace, hello. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I've got a billion and one questions I want to ask you, but we're only 30 minutes, so I can only get to like maybe 8. So, but I think we're going to cover a good broad spectrum. And I think this will go really, really well. So let's start with leadership. Because I think in this trying time as we're going through this COVID crisis and as we try to get out of this COVID crisis, leadership has been brought to the forefront. Good leadership, especially as at the national level has been kind of vacant. As a younger generation, and as the younger voice, talk to me about how important it is to have that perspective as it goes into really leading going forward.
Absolutely. And, I'll start with a little bit of my background because I think that it's definitely part of why I believe so much in our need for stronger leadership in City Hall. I work at Portland State University. I have a master's of education, and I've been an educator for 10 years. And I work with the student government on campus. And I found my voice and my leadership as a young person in student government. And so I kind of followed that through into a career, into helping other people that were like me to rise up and talk about things that matter and make sure that they are heard in decisions that are being made for their future. So, that is a big reason why I'm running, because I feel like I not only can hear that generation, I'm on the ground, I'm a part of it. And I feel the impact of, the way that the economy is leaving us behind and leaving us out of the conversation. And so I think that with 4 out of 5 of those seats being open, we can't afford to not have this voice there, especially as we're trying to recover from COVID-19. And I think leadership just really comes from, being able to understand the people that you represent. Being able to speak on their needs and also, just be good stewards of the dollar that they're putting into the government, that dollar is there to protect them and give them resources. So I think that communication and good leadership are going to be pivotal. And I feel that I've built a career on leadership. And I think that I can offer a different kind of leadership in City Hall.
Right. As we're talking about leadership, so much of that leadership is going to be needed, crucial leadership as we look towards what I'd like to term an equitable recovery. And there are good ways and bad ways of coming through this. Bad ways is not covering everyone under the umbrella and just helping those in the highest tax bracket and so forth, and not where it truly really is needed for the marginalized and just the day-to-day paycheck to paycheck people who are just trying to get by. How at the city commission level, how can you help bring about a not only good policy, but also that comforting sort of steadiness that's really needed at this time?
Absolutely. Well, I think we're definitely seeing that all of these efforts that are being dispersed, these resources for businesses and people, are unfortunately just continuing to go to the people that have already had access, people that have big businesses. And it's like, where's your money? Oh, it's in stocks. Well, that's not our problem that you spent it. And now you need a bailout from the people who are continuing to give into that. Yeah. And then, looking at like the stimulus check, for example, it's like how many houseless people went without, and they needed the absolute most. So, and they needed it before this, right? So I think that it's going to be really important for us as city leaders to really look at, who is on the bottom rung and what do they need, and start there. And I really think that intersects with how we're addressing houselessness, especially as we're trying to recover. Not only are they so vulnerable that they are more likely to contract the disease, and they're going to spread it, and we need to be able to protect them so they can protect themselves, but also so we can protect the community. So I think that is going to be crucial for all of the people coming into City Hall in 2021, that they are putting that at the top of the agenda, and for real this time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that, equity in these resources, we can create systems to have accountability for how we spend it. And you know what? I think PSEF is a really good example of that, the Portland Clean Energy Fund Committee. Because it's like, okay, you're going to have money that's going to be coming to address the needs of low income and communities of color. Let's put those same communities on the board that's making decisions for how that money gets dispersed. I think that's a really good model to begin with. And I'd love to see more programming like that gives the people directly more input, because, we as leaders, we don't know all the answers. I'm not running because I think I know all the answers, but I know how to bring everybody that has those answers to the table and come to the best solution. So I think that's going to be pivotal when it comes to how we talk about equitable distribution.
Right. And as we continue to talk about equitable recovery, so much of that is going to be affected as far as affordable housing. I believe, because the rent doesn't stop, right? And those people who had it tough during quote unquote normal times have just got to, everyone thinks about what's happening right now as far as like a rent sort of freeze almost a little bit. Something tells me it's not going to be that way and forever, and the poor people, they're just going to find themselves instantly underwater. And that scares not only me but a lot of people. How can the city commission and really as far as policies and just vision address that as we move forward?
Yes. Well, honestly, I'm a big supporter of giving people their money back in cash. And I think that rental assistance is going to be really key, because so many people that were already teeter-tottering on the edge are going to be pushed over with COVID-19, with the loss of jobs and income. And so I think that the way that we look at our resources as we're budgeting for how we're going to recover, I would like to see money that is going directly to families and saying, we need you to stay in your home, because it's so much cheaper for us in the long run to keep people where they are. And so I think that rental assistance is going to be huge in addressing that. And I think that also, as far as leadership goes and what you're saying, part of my campaign is about how we change communication with constituents, because I see the government as, it's outdated. And, I'm a millennial, right? But like a lot of us are, and the way we engage with each other, it's unique. Kind of, like you were speaking earlier about how your kids are just so much more plugged in, and it's true. We just have so much more access to resources. And so how are we leveraging that to make sure the government is intersecting with the ways that we're engaging with each other and saying, give us your feedback. And here's, some easy information about how to do X, Y, Z. Again, working with students, I had one student who was like, I don't even know how to vote from my home. And I was like, honestly, I barely know how to do that either. The whole putting up the little red thing on the, I don't have a mailbox like that. So I made a video for it. I did it for my campaign, and I was like, here's how you do it, and I think that we can be creative in how we communicate to people. And it's going to be things that can be, our everyday things. Let's make sure that the agenda and what we're talking about in City Hall is more widely known, so that if people want to give us feedback, they can. But then also that crucial information. My campaign manager is a small business owner, and she has been so frustrated by the lack of communication. I would like to see us use Prosper Portland to put some more funds in there. And I think that that's going to be really important.
Right. And of course, affordable housing to me also kind of dovetails into the homeless situation. And as the burgeoning homelessness, and even more so as people find themselves deeply, deeply underwater from this. How does the city commission, how do they come together and figure out ways to alleviate and just deal with it?
Well, I think that for me, what I see is there needs to be more of a case management approach to houselessness, because number one, people that end up houseless, it is so many different things that can get them there, whether it is, the loss of a job or a domestic violence situation, an addiction, a mental health issue. But, it's also about relationships. It's about people that have broken relationships, and relationships are how a lot of us move through the world more smoothly. And so I think that is where the city needs to be more of a relationship builder with its people, especially those that are houseless. And I think like Street Roots does a really good job of that. They provide community for their vendors, and, they celebrate when they get housing. And I really want to see us leading more on that with compassionate policies that show our empathy and our leadership. And I think that, we need to give people things that they need. They need water, they need sanitation, they need a safe place to just be, right? Yeah. And so I'd like to see us invest in more self-governed spaces. I know that is a controversial opinion for some, because people are like, I don't want to have, a space in my neighborhood that's for the houseless. But you know what? We're going to need to give a little here. We're really going to need to make room for our neighbors, that this is their community too, and they deserve some dignity and respect. And I think the city needs to be forthcoming with giving them the basic tools they need, having places where they can have sanitation. People need the dignity of a bathroom, and being able to wash your hands, especially with COVID-19. And then making sure that if we're moving people around, we're moving them into shelters or into, onto paths towards shelter. And so I would, when it refers to like the sweeps, because those are also controversial and people are upset about that, and they should be, because we keep shuffling vulnerable people around, sending them down further into this spiral of poverty. And we have to be more creative about how we make those decisions for sweeps and make sure that we have somewhere for them to go.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's switch gears here a little bit, and let's talk about climate change and the green technologies and how to progress forward, in the city of Portland as we move through the crisis and really move forward. Portland has always, and Oregon has always been a leader as far as green technologies are concerned. How do you, at the city council and the city commissioner level, how do you want to help push that along?
Addressing the climate crisis, like many things, is about strategy. It's about assessment. It's about good benchmarking and bringing in the right people to make the decisions that make the most sense based on the data. So I think that, as we are working towards our plans to become carbon neutral and to have a greener economy, make sure that our development is in a sustainable way, that is going to take some serious coordination between the bureaus, because so many of the issues of the bureaus intersect into how we address climate change. It's a big reason why I'm a proponent for changing the form of government, because I think that the way it currently is structured, when you have these bureaus these commissioners overseeing bureaus in these silos, and it makes it really difficult for that cross-cutting strategy that needs to be happening to address the issues like housing and houselessness and transportation. So I really feel that this is also another opportunity where let's let young people lead. There are so many dynamic young people who are not only committed to this issue because, of course, it affects them the most, but they're creative. They're coming up with innovative ways to design new systems that are going to get us on a path towards a greener city. And how are we investing those ideas back into our city? So I would really like to see us better partnering with that next generation on addressing this climate crisis.
And that is a great segue into the next question. Is really something that's been on my mind is the younger generation and how to engage and how they can become engaged and really find and amplify their voice. how do we, me, an old curmudgeon, how do we engage them and tell them their voice is so crucial at this time and their vote is so crucial at this time? How do we combat the, being turned off and just, oh my gosh, I see all this, on TV and I don't want anything to do with it, or how do we combat that?
Civic engagement is a muscle. And I think that education is a really important start where people get that muscle worked. That's something that I do in my work at PSU. I actually run an internship program it's like a political science PS 199 class, and they intern with student government, but also, I help them explore what are their passions, what do they care about, and then connect them to things in the community so that they can invest that energy in those passions, right? So I think that what I would really like to see is the city being a leader on having paid internships. I mean, it sounds so simple and so obvious, but we really don't invest enough resources into things like that. And that is not only giving young people a genuine place at the table and giving them opportunities to be a part of discussions that we're having. But it also, it funnels them in, it makes them passionate about government. It makes them passionate about, wanting to represent their communities. And I see it all the time with my students. I was just talking with a group of students the other day, and one of them, she's currently on my student fee committee. And she started in my internship last year, and she's worked her way up. She's on the student fee committee. She just got elected for another term. And I was like, you know what? You are a perfect example of how when you give people the resources that they need, the tools that they need to be taken seriously and to put their ideas into action, they will blossom. And so I really believe that City Hall, that's where it needs to start. Because your local democracy affects your life so much more. And, a lot of it is just teaching. I'm texting a bunch of 18 to 21-year-olds right now being like, hey, get your ballot in. You know what I mean? It's easy now. And here's how you do it. And we're lucky to live in a state where it is so easy to vote. And so I have been doing, every year at PSU, we do a huge voter drive, and we get, tons of people to turn in their ballots. And so, I think that I have a lot of strategies on this, and it's totally a big reason why I'm running, because I think that we can do better.
Excellent. I just got a quick follow-up question because while we were talking, something popped in my brain. As an educator, do you feel it's important that we restart, in high school and even junior high and grade school, what we had when I was a strapping young lad, civics?
Oh yeah.
Because I think that is one that's kind of just disappeared and gone into the ether. And that sounds like so much of what you're talking about at the college level, but applying that in a more accessible way as a learning tool for the younger generation, because it seems like they're already kind of plugged in anyway. They're way more socially conscious than I ever was, And what do you think about that?
So I'll tell you a quick story. I'm like, I can't remember his name, but I had a really awesome civics teacher in 7th grade. And he was just so good at engaging us and helping us connect, how all of these things connect to the bigger picture, things that were happening in our lives as young people. And actually, one day I was on my way to civics class, and I'm a nerd, so I was always at class, right? There's 5 minutes to transition to class, and I was always in there first, and everyone's in the hall, but I'm a nerd. And he was like, hey, come look over here. And I was like, what is it? And it was 9/11 that was happening. And that was in Northern Virginia. And so but I remember that moment so much in my life, because not only I was walking into my civics class, he's showing us this, we were talking about these different dynamics, right, in class. Yeah. And then that happened. And that was a life-changing moment right there for many of us that experienced that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think about how important the role that he played in helping us process that as 12-year-olds. And I think it is so important that we have more teachers like him and that we really invest in that kind of curriculum to be like standard, not just optional. I know I appreciated that was like a standard part of your curriculum back where I grew up, and you had to take government and, all these world history classes and stuff. So yes, I totally think that we need to invest way earlier in that, because again, civic engagement is a muscle. And if you give people the opportunity to be heard and to feel like their voice matters, anything's possible.
Excellent. We were talking about the equitable recovery, and I've always been a little concerned through this about as we come out of it, the making sure our leaders are representing all. Everyone is under the umbrella. Nobody, because even under the most normal times, so many people are marginalized and they're falling through the cracks. And at a time where all of that is exacerbated to a breaking point almost, how do we make sure that our leaders and Portland, City Commission, City Council, how do we make sure that everyone is being under the umbrella, everyone is being represented?
Well, I think it starts with the simple fact that representation matters, because I am somebody that is my lived experience. I look at the people that run for City Hall or run for City Council, and so often there are people that are homeowners, that, they have wealth, they're able to move through this economy smoothly. And I've had a really hard time. Not only with my astronomical student debt, and you know what, I did everything right. I was told, go to school. My grandparents brought my mom across the border in the 1970s, and trust me, they instilled in me, education is our way up. That is how we are going to make it in this country. And so I took that seriously, and I did everything I needed to do. And here I am with this debt that is a huge burden. I can't afford to buy a home because of it. And, how am I, if I can't get by, how are others that didn't go and get their master's degree doing, right? So I definitely think that having that voice is a huge first step, because if you don't know what that feels like to live paycheck to paycheck, how could you even begin to form policies around that? And I think that too often politics is exclusive to people that have money and resources. And that's why we continue to not see any of that money and resources trickle down to us. So I think that, and honestly, there's a lot of really awesome people running for City Council that have these different experiences. And I think no matter what, this is a decade defining election for Portland City Hall. And I think it's going to be I'm hoping that some of these like stronger voices get elected like myself, so we can really change our path going forward.
Right. Changing the path. How does that come into context with infrastructure? Because so much of it needs to be addressed. I mean, we were talking, in the past several years about everything being overhauled. I had desperate need for some just fundamental change in the way the infrastructure here. I know here in the metro area, infrastructure a lot is through Metro, but it's got to work hand in glove with the city council and even more up with Multnomah County and so forth. How at the city council level, how do you move forward with that, as in with communication and just a broad vision for the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's another good reason why I think we need district representation for Portland City Hall, because so often communities that they don't have representatives at City Hall, they all come from the West Side, a lot of them have, and East Portland has been neglected for decades. And we continue to say, people continue to run on, equity for East Portland, and it's like, when is it going to happen? You know what I mean? I mean, I've seen it over the years. Every year there's new candidates, and it's like they don't have any power. So that infrastructure is going to be addressed by the system in which our government governs. And I think that, obviously that's a long-term issue, but I think infrastructure is a long-term problem. And the root of the problem for me is how we govern. And I think that having those districts, not only would people be able to be represented from these places, but also they could be more collaborative with the city or with the county and metro, because those district partners could be more in sync with how they're making decisions across those jurisdictions for different areas of the city, because every area needs different things, right? So I think that obviously I know my answer is a big picture, but I really think it's the root and is why I'm running on that kind of platform, because I think we can't, again, we keep talking about how we're going to do these things for people. They need power and they need consistency, and that's going to happen by changing our government.
Excellent. How does that, what is the first step, do you think? Candace Avalos, day one, bam, you're there behind the lectern or the desk. What is the first step?
Well, I think the first step for me is going to be how I hire my staff and my team, because I really want to be strategic about the kinds of people I'm bringing on and the kinds of positions I'm creating. I think that Joanne Hardesty, for example, she's got like a community engagement person, and that was kind of new for City Hall. And it's like, why is that new? Why isn't that in every office, and why isn't that a high priority, right? So I think that I would really want to put a lot of time into how I'm building my team and what their duties are going to be. And then the other thing is, of course, going in, I know that the government's not going to be different, and we're going to have to work on that. So I'm going to have to work within this bureau commissioner system. And I really want to create some action teams. Again, strategic leadership. I mean, that's what I do. I do that at PSU. I created a national organization to unite student government leaders across the country in our best practices. I know how to bring people together to the table and come up with solutions that we can all be proud of. So I think that that's going to be a big part, is these action teams I want to create on housing and houselessness, on transportation, get the people that I need to know, the experts that I need to know and hear from in the room, and start there so I can start to build out what that larger vision and plan is for my term of 4 years.
Excellent. Next question is having to deal with law enforcement. As far as a good, positive public, not only public image, but public policy and execution of policies. How would you talk a little bit about that relationship and what needs to be addressed and really more focused on?
Well, I have a lot of opinions about this because I'm the acting chair of the Citizen Review Committee, which is a police accountability board for the city of Portland. And, it's also a big reason why I decided to run, because we were having so many issues pushing through policies that the community agreed upon and had City Hall support. And we would keep getting stonewalled on making these changes that we needed to increase accountability of the police. I think that the relationship that the police have with the community is really at the core of the relationship that the community has with the city. And so that's why I think it is the number one priority to address that relationship, because it's going to better the relationship people have with City Hall. And I think that right now, of course, people often say, well, we need a police, or we need a culture change in the police, and that comes with leadership. Sure, it does, but you can't have a culture change without true accountability. And so the number one thing I would be advocating for is changing the standard of review for the Citizen Review Committee. Currently, they have a standard that is unfortunately has to be unnecessarily differential to the police when we make our decisions. And I'd like to see us move to a preponderance. I won't get into all the details, it's a lot, but that's the basics of it. And I think that's a good first step to ensure that, that board has actual teeth, that it's not just an empty gesture by the city, what we're doing. Because, we made a decision that we agreed with the police chief on that needed to be made because an officer lied to a protester that they could be arrested for filming, and that is not true. And it was a huge case that it moved through all these levels. We agreed on what the punishment was going to be, or that there was going to be consequences. And then the police chief decided without even informing us to go back on that. So it's like, well, what are we doing here then, right? Until we can fix those systems and ensure that kind of stuff doesn't happen, we're going to continue to have a damaged relationship and in our trust with the police. So I don't think the mayor would give me the police, the Portland Police Bureau. I highly doubt that, but I'm going to beg them for it because I think that I can offer some new strategies for how we build that relationship.
Candace, why don't you give everyone the information, URLs?
My website is candaceforportland.com. On there, you can see my platform, a little bit more about me. And then you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Candace4PDX. And I would love the support to get this new generation of leadership to City Hall. So thank you.
Excellent.